Remember when we used to talk about the paperless office?
E-commerce?
Signing a contract on paper.
And even giving out an agent's pager number?
We're in a mobile world.
We're in a mobile world, and your business needs to be too.
It's a digital world.
Workflow is changing, and so too are our experiences.
There are over 350 PropTech players right now
Competing for the space.
How do you keep up with it all? And what's next?
Welcome to Founders.
A new podcast with Josh Phegan
On the future of workflow in real estate.
Welcome to Founders. In this episode, we're going to have a great conversation with Steve Osborn, the founder of Identity Marketing. Marketing is a really important part of what is it we do in terms of being a residential real estate agent. The whole conversation is, what's the purpose of a brand? Is it actually to elevate you, or is it ultimately that whole position of what you're doing to try to get better quality pricing power when you're getting the lounge room or the boardroom? Naturally, how do you go to produce incredibly addictive content? From the templates that you use, how your brand actually feels in the digital environment, from emails to socials, to what's actually happening in the physical world of the touch and feelable brochures and signage and outdoor signage that goes with your brand. What's the evolution of age-specific marketing? And what are we doing between the difference between conversion and awareness campaigns? Steve, this is going to be a great conversation, and ultimately one of the key things I always think about is that, in getting you to know you over the course of the last 15 years, is that literally you've had the chance to work with some of the biggest and best brands, but also too those that have established themselves to really take markets by storm, even if they're a brand within a brand. Give us an idea. What is the purpose of a brand?
The whole purpose of a brand, Josh, is really to separate your business from your competitor's business. And a lot of people say, this is my brand, but ultimately, your brand is what your customers say it is. So it's their gut feeling to how they perceive your brand. And you can control that through your visuals, through the aesthetics, through some of the messaging that you use, and through the customer service. And so by really crafting that, you can really control what your customers are saying about that. And so brands that are really strong at doing that hold really strong positions in the market, and that's so they can separate themselves from their competitors. But then sometimes you see these brands who will start really strong, they'll have some great templates, they'll look really good on social, give it a few months, and then all of a sudden they're introducing these new assets that aren't part of their brand. You scroll down their feed, it keeps changing. You see things in the letterbox that are off-brand, there's spelling mistakes. Then consumers start to put together one and two, and all of a sudden they've got four, and they start going, these guys are a bit unorganised, they're a bit messy. They'll start putting together whatever words they want to associate back to that brand. So that brand control piece really lets you control the narrative that consumers put back onto your brand.
So my thought is really interesting is that I might go for a run, and I was right there running this morning, and I ran past the Aesop store in Balmain, and it's they charge $45 for some soap. And foundationally, I remember growing up as a little kid, we used to get Imperial Leather, and that was a soap bar that mum probably picked up from Coles or Woolworths. Yeah, right. It was good. So, but the interesting foundational conversation on that is that ultimately, Imperial Leather was probably $2.50 for a bar of soap. I'm now paying $45 for a dispenser of soap. It's probably the same amount of washes, that I probably get out of that. But what is it that literally that Aesop has done that has actually created this brand and presence and profile that's helped them to build a business that's sold for $1 billion? And the interesting foundational concept is that literally that brand that they've wrapped around is that there's an air of quality. They've made a decision about separation. It's about ease. It's about, giving you rituals and routines that make you feel more human, about connecting in with the moments of touching and feeling your hands under warm water, the feeling of that soap, the lather that might go on, the conversation of the scents that actually come when you're, maybe for example, scrubbing your back or whatever the story might be, right the way through to, okay, great, so what do we actually do in store? So from our point of sale displays, the smell of our store in terms of the scent, what we're doing in terms of the music, what we're doing in terms of the architectural merit of what's actually happening in that building. There's a whole range of reasons that then when it gets down to the packaging, and then I ultimately buy the item and they want to add me to their profile, not their database, then the conversation where they're going to give me some extra things to try to see whether it might suit my particular condition. And then ultimately they then spray that particular bag with a scent that literally becomes the Aesop scent in your mind. Now, Steve, this is an incredible brand that literally began in Melbourne in Fitzroy. The foundational idea here is that they've obviously made a decision that brand is really important. And what I always say to people is that service experience equals brand, and brand equals pricing power. So ultimately, if you think about positioning, and I know you've got a big piece on this, where do you actually fit inside of your marketplace and what is your intention? So if you go and have a quick look at it and you go, okay, great, at the top of the tree, there might be some incredible brands that we've seen. Christie's Great Estates, for example, the whole conversation around Forbes. They're known to deal with top-end residential property. If you then go and have a quick look at it, there was another brand that entered Australia, which was called Purple Bricks. They were $4,500 transaction. They're no longer around. And foundationally, that it really said something when you had a Purple Bricks sign out the front of your house.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, about when you're thinking now about purpose and brand and elevation and making the decision of the markets that you want to play in when you go to that brand development stage.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When you do go through that stage, one of the key things that we uncover when we work with someone is what are the key things that their brand does that makes them special. And a lot of people approach that in a price range, so top, middle, bottom of the market. But there's so many other directions you can approach that in. Like if you go back to the example of Aesop, where we're talking about soap. I don't know if you ever saw that Throw Like a Girl campaign by Dove, where it's really quite aspirational, where they have a bunch of boys on stage, and they like young men, and they ask them to throw a ball and then they ask them to throw a ball like a girl, and then all of a sudden the way they throw that changes, and then they ask little girls to do that, and the way they throw they throw the ball doesn't change at all. They throw it exactly the same way that a boy would throw it. But then at a certain age, girls start throwing differently, and that whole campaign was really just about positioning the brand to show that they're really on the side of women, and there's so many other directions that a brand can take than other just top, middle and bottom of the market.
So we used to go and call that like cause-based marketing, right? Like you go in and you buy your burger at one of the burger joints and they say, okay, great, by the way, you now get a credit and you can put it into the homeless shelter for women, you can put it in the homeless shelter for men, you can put it in the young kids, whatever, that need help and support. But the interesting thing is that cause-based marketing made you feel good about what it is that you're doing.
Felt nice to eat there.
Yeah, but the interesting conversation is that literally you're really talking about the conversation around brand elevation, around what does it actually mean to be a part of this brand. So when that signboard, in terms of the tactical and practical, is out the front of your property, will people fundamentally feel that your property is worth more because of that brand, right?
Yeah. So like we're working with a company at the moment, and they've got about four main competitors in their marketplace. They've got someone that's doing a really good job in volume. They've got someone that's doing a really good job in that high-end area of the market. And then they've got 2 or 3 franchise groups, just sort of that middle bottom of the range market that they're selling in. And what we're doing with them is to help them identify a space in the market that's different. And so the space that we're seeing that's different in the market is really around being bespoke. So when you do list a property with them, you've got a choice of signboards. They're all on brand. You've got a choice of different brochures that are all on brand. And that we then look at the agent photography. How would a bespoke agent dress? How would a bespoke brand look? How would a bespoke brand sound? What are some of the words that it might use? What are the campaigns that it might have? What are some of the community events, like studio opens, that it might align itself with? To really like tie that brand position back into the market. So when people that are wanting to sell their home and they do want that option where someone is going to look at their home and consider the best ways to market that property, they'll think that, okay, these guys are the right brand for me, for this. And then also on the recruitment side of it, they're really wanting to be an attraction brand. And so now they've actually got something that's different to their competitors. And so agents that are in the market that are tired of doing things a certain way and are looking for a different option, they've now got this option to go to. Yeah,
and then there's the evolution of what we've got to call a challenger brand, right? So like AHM in the health insurance space are very much a challenger brand when it comes to getting health insurance. UE are probably that when it actually comes to, getting insurance for your car. When it comes to residential real estate, it's about this conversation around the difference of being David or Goliath.
Yeah.
And we all know the brand or the brands in Australia that claim to be David, and we all know the brands in Australia or in particular cities that claim to be Goliath. And that whole idea is that literally, is it possible for David to beat Goliath? And is it possible for Goliath to smash David? What are your thoughts here when it comes to brands?
Yeah, that's really interesting because challenger brands are only challenger brands until they're Goliath. You can see that with Harris and Adelaide. They started out as a real challenger brand in their market, and now they're one of the biggest players in Adelaide, if not the biggest. And you see that in other markets as well, like other industries. So you think of like Volkswagen or even Apple. They were both once challenger brands, but now they've done incredibly successful jobs at growing their business and growing their brand and getting a huge customer base. And starting out as a challenger brand, ultimately what you're doing is just challenging the status quo, saying that there is a better way of doing things, there is a different way of doing things. And I think...
But actually doing it too.
And actually doing it and meaning it. And if you can tie that meaning back into, say, like the values the brand has, the mission the brand has, maybe even the brand name, all of a sudden, like, you've actually got depth to your company as opposed to, well, we just kind of copy the guys down the road.
And this is what the industry is really good at, right, is R&D, so replicate and duplicate. Ultimately research and develop, and really getting clear about what's actually going to get you into the position that you can do that. And, Steve, like we've seen pretty phenomenal uplifts where someone's gone to do a brand refresh or a rebrand, And ultimately, there's an old school saying, and this might be controversial, that people only rebrand if they feel that they are relevant in the marketplace. So the foundational idea about why you're doing a rebrand or why you're refreshing your brand is because you feel that maybe you have not quite got to where you want to be, and that aspirationally it's time to actually go there. And so that means that we've got to start thinking very differently beyond just what the brand look and feel looks like. So it's not just a typeface, a color palette, a set of tools around the way that we got to position it. It's then actually understanding, okay, great, how are we actually going to speak? And a lot of people talk about what we've got to call tone of voice, right? So how you going is not really Josh Phegan.
No.
How are you today is much more along the brand tone. Now, the interesting conversation is that how important is it for people to develop some sort of personification about that brand?
So one of the key things that we work on when we help customers in that space is we work on their customer profiles. So for example, I imagine if you had a range of profiles, I think you've got Andrew, who's a real estate agent that's lost his memory, but we'll work with people and we'll look at who are the different customers that they service. And then we start to build out names, we start to build out jobs that they might have, we start to look at what are their problems that they actually have in life. So for the younger people, they're trying to get into a home. For the older people, they're looking for a home that they can move into and maybe has less maintenance. No stairs, that type of thing. And we really start to build out these profiles. Once we've built out these profiles and we know who they're actually trying to serve, then we know how we can help them. So then we start thinking back, okay, what are some of the types of words that our brand could use, and what are some of the problems that they have that we can help them solve?
So this is a great one too, because we're now seeing the biggest generational transfer of wealth in Australia over the course of the next decade. As the baby boomers get closer to the sunset than the sunrise, then ultimately, how do you get very clear about age-specific marketing? And Steve, this is kind of an interesting thing that, you go onto an agency's website, you have a quick look at what they're doing in terms of their socials, you have a look at their videos. Are they actually representative of the audiences that they're trying to serve? So tell us a little bit about that. Is there such a thing as age-specific marketing, and is this a real market?
It's a huge market. It's a massive market. There's, my parents are selling their home at the moment, and I've seen this getting your home ready for sale list 1,000 times in my career, and I never thought too much of it. And then I went to my parents' home, and they literally have it on the fridge, and they're ticking the things off on the fridge. And to them, they're like, oh, well, the real estate agent told me to do this, so I'm doing this.
But yet a great brand would just do all of those things for them and charge a fee for it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but again, that goes back to positioning. My parents are the do-it-yourself type, but if you're like, and they're retired, so they've got time, right? But like, if you're still working and you don't have time, or you're traveling or you don't want to do it, then there's a different brand for you that's going to help with that. But, like even just some of the challenges that they have, like they're trying to find a new home, single level, no stairs, smaller yard, there's no search abilities on any websites to do that. So that's one of the key things that we're sort of working through at the moment to help refine some of that so people can.
So you got to get into real world situations, and you think about like customer classes. Like this is really interesting because it starts to get you to think that, what you're trying to do is you're making that positioning happen. But then you're starting to think about where are these people going to see us and what sort of experiences they're actually going to have. So, Steve, that's going to end up in two places probably, right? One is the digital world and one is the physical world.
Yep.
Does the physical world still have a place?
Massive.
Like ultimately, you're very strong on that, but with less and less newspaper, with less and less magazine, what is actually in the physical world that actually makes a difference?
So if we go back to that age sort of related marketing, and we've done some work for some retirement villages where we've done the brand and we've done the website and all the brochures and everything like that. One of the key things that we always do for anything that's in that retirement space is brochures that are too big to fit into a bookcase. You want them sitting on the on the coffee table,
right?
Because you need the people around them to help them make that decision. Because often what we see is that the parents have some sort of fear or some sort of reason for not wanting to move into these retirement village or not wanting to downsize. And so having this thing that's out in a space that can't be hidden away, it then starts these conversations where the siblings start to talk to them and start to encourage the parents to make that. So when you are looking at that sort of older demographic, there's so much that they still do in that print space. It just makes so much sense. And also, if you even younger people, like you're going into a home, you're listing that home for sale, or you're going up against the competitors. If everyone's digital and you're the only one going in there with this beautiful document that you can give to them that positions the company, that talks about who you are, what you do, why the company is here to help you, what are some of the key things that we do that other people don't do, some really good case studies in there. And you've actually got this physical, beautifully printed document left there with them, and everyone else has got these, I don't know, like ring-bound documents just sitting there, or a few loose pieces of paper inside of a folder. Like, there's a huge positioning difference there.
And the age-old story is that, physical is beyond just print, right? It's a conversation around what you're doing with signboards, what you're doing in terms of signage, pointer signage, flags, what actually ends up happening in terms of outdoor advertising, the conversations around that. I was driving this morning and a bus went past and there was a movie poster on it, and I thought, geez, man, I've not thought to go to the movie for a long time, and it's the first time I've seen a movie poster in ages.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, you know what, if you were a marketer and you were trying to get that in front of me, what would that actually look like? And that's actually a really hard thing for them to do, because if I'm in such a digital nomad, the way to interrupt that pattern is to put it in a place that you'd want to see it.
Yeah.
So in my world, I tend to walk through a lot of airports. So airport advertising would be important, really important if you're after someone who's got a high level of mobility. If you're in a position that ultimately you really want to get in, then doing that sponsorship and the event partnership, for example, with the local bowling club, and that's where you know that the specific demographic or audience that you're involved with, that absolutely makes a lot of sense. Or the under-8 soccer and being on all of their jerseys, that also makes sense. If you're a parent of that soccer club, you fundamentally love it, and that's actually how you're going to think you're going to go and generate a lot of leads. Now, this is an interesting thing, Steve, because it gets us into this whole idea about learning why, you build out a brand, but then what does it look like a month and 10 months and 2 years and 5 years down the track in terms of the application? And agents fundamentally struggle with this concept of content. Now, people say, do I write a blog? Do I do this? Do I do that? And one of the big things that I'm focusing on is about addictive content. So the things that I think are addictive is I think that people are addicted to off-market. I think they're addicted to new listings.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they're addicted to sold prices. So I come to your website, how quickly can I get that? How quickly can I get off-market? How quickly can I sign up to receive the alerts about off-market? How quickly can I see the new ones? And how quickly can I again go and see the sold results that have happened in the area that are going to give me an idea on A, what my place is worth, and B, ultimately, one that I might have bought, what did it actually go to sell for? The great thing about this is that all of these properties have already got a marketing campaign attached where there's beautiful photography, great videography, there's a lot of sound effects associated with that videography, and that has the ability to allow it to play on. What are your thoughts there about agents just thinking that if they just get addictive content right and they do it really well between video and copywriting and photography, and then think about how that's then displayed inside of the social environments, does that change the game?
Massively. We're working with a company at the moment, JR Property, over in Perth, and they're doing an incredible job with their videography and their photography. And you can just see that they're really going to dominate in their marketplace, because they're listing a lot of homes, they're selling a lot of homes, they've just come together, and we've helped them create this new brand that's really sort of positioned in that higher end of the market. But what's really interesting is that consumers are really wanting that really nice videography. And so all of the conversations that we're having with them is really around, let's keep pushing that, let's keep doing that, let's find ways to elevate that. Because ultimately, their competitors aren't doing that, and their competitors are saying, well, our homeowners don't want to spend money on marketing. Whereas these guys are getting a lot of money for marketing to market their properties in a certain way.
Founders is brought to you by Josh Phegan Digital. When we were setting out to go and create Josh Phegan Digital, we just had this whole idea that we wanted training to be on demand. And everything in our life is on demand. We just press play inside of the Netflix app. We press play on YouTube, play on Spotify. Why couldn't we just press play on training? And what we decided is we want to be super relevant to real estate agents, so that in under a couple of minutes each day, if you wanted to, you could upskill and you could grow in new ways. And so we decided that we were going to release this thing that we called The Edit, which is basically the latest in property news stories that's happening every week right the way around the country, so you could be incredibly sharp in your conversations with sellers. And then we built out the short courses, which was all about rapidly building skills, whether or not it's about learning how to get better fees or to put on an assistant. And then we actually wanted to give you access to blueprints, so you didn't have to wait for it every year. You could just watch it whenever you wanted and actually go from zero to hero around everything that it takes, from goal setting, self and energy management, what you're doing around prospecting, listing, negotiation, and actually just have a system for the way that you work. Together with, getting really inspired by some of the best people in the industry with the black and white interviews. Josh Phegan Digital is available on iOS and also on Android. It's an incredible app, and it gives you everything that you'll need to be a much better agent. It's time to switch on. And so, Steve, this is what we got to call learn how to split the content in different ways, because digital's so hungry for assets, right?
Oh, so you're listing a property for sale. There's so many things you can do to it. There can be Like you could have a piece of video that's like 10 seconds long that's going out on a story that just says coming soon, no address, just have the suburb. The day before you could say launching tomorrow, again, no address, just the suburb, just to kind of like tease people, get them excited for it. Day of the listing, actually put the full reel out there on Instagram, get that going. You can be doing stuff on first opens. You can do stuff before the auctions. You can have stuff like behind the scenes of the auctions, behind the scenes of the first opens.
So a lot of this is about making decisions, right? Like you've got people who do like, the one take walkthroughs where, they're kind of like walking through the property and there's a camera and they're talking to it about the whole home.
Yeah.
There's a conversation where the agent's not even in the video. And I hear a lot of agents that say, hey, Josh, I wouldn't go to video because I don't look good in video. I'm like, well, it doesn't get any better in real life. But the foundational piece is that I actually say to you, hang on a second, I've never met Steven Spielberg, but I know his work.
Yeah.
Because Steven Spielberg presents ABC,
yeah.
right? So that whole conversation is about learning that you can do that. Josh Phegan presents 24 Holmwood Crescent, and all of a sudden there's the great videography around that particular property itself. So you don't just have to jump in a pool to get it viral. If it's a beautiful property, you can move in a position that you can learn how to go to position your brand.
Yeah, and you can even choose how you're going to position yourself. Like I think of Marnie Senior. She's done an incredible job on her videography. She's just really started to elevate it in the last few months. And a lot of that's all filmed on a phone. So someone's walking through the home. She's doing the tour of the home. She's also doing these like case studies where she's saying, okay, today I've got an auction. Let's hope we sell it. Goes through the phase of the auction, then does like a wrap up afterwards. And it really just lets her bring her personality out on camera.
So personification of the brand and learning how to get comfortable in front of camera, right?
Yeah.
And what I would say to you is that like this is interesting because, that addictive content is going to require some sort of form of templates. And, one of the things that is one of the greatest lead generators of all time is your ability to be able to send an email every week with what's been listed and what's been sold in your area, the address of the property, click on the link. And again, another great email would be an auction results email that might go out every Saturday afternoon. Another great email, for example, may well be about investment properties we've currently got available for sale that have currently leased, properties that would lease well and properties that have got development potential. Why don't agents think this way, Steve, in terms of dividing the content up and thinking about the power of segmentation inside of the database?
What's really interesting is I went through an open home recently and as I went through the open home, the agent asked me a few questions, and one of the key questions was, are you looking to buy this home or is it for an investment? I said investment. Now I'm on their email list getting their investment properties, but on top of that, I've also had a call from them to actually book in a strategy session to help me go through the process of buying an investment property. So that they're really reverse engineering, like what are the problems that I have? How can they help me? How can they help service me in that? They've also identified that I live in a certain area, in a certain postcode, and now I'm getting like text messages and calls about properties that have been listed or sold. So they've really learned to segment that and really service me in a way that makes sense for me. And all they had to do was ask a few key questions, which probably came from training from you.
Yeah, so I think that whole conversation is about like really learning, okay, when someone comes to you, they go, okay, Steve, my issue is that I'm not generating enough leads, or I feel like I'm losing in the listing presentation and our brand's not strong enough, or, we're in a position that we're in a franchise group and we want to look better, or maybe we've made the decision to become independent, so we want to go and create an identity. And normally when people do that, like it's not always the solution to leave the existing. A lot of it is actually about how do you become better as a marketer inside of the existing business that you're already in today. For those that have made the decision to break cover or to refresh their brand or to renew their brand, there's a conversation around, well, what should our brand name actually be? What are your thoughts about how that comes into the branding conversation?
Yeah, there's a couple of key things. Like in real estate, a lot of people will go down the path of using their surname, and that makes sense. And it's a convention that people know and understand. If you've got a name that's easy to say and it's memorable, like Josh Saliba, Saliba Estate Agents, highly recommend leaning into that. And there's two key things that we really look for in brand names. The first is it's memorable, easy to say. And then the second one is if you can get it to tie back in with some more depth in your company, then it makes sense. Like, so for example, our company is called Identity Marketing, and that's for a reason because we believe in getting brands' identity right first. If we can get that right, then their marketing is going to cost a lot less and break through go a lot further.
So this is kind of an interesting thing is about it, like if I called it Josh Phegan Real Estate, my argument is Dick Smith was around, Ray White was around, like there's a ton of people that have done it. Leslie Hooker, the original LJ Hooker, it is possible to break that through, but there's a lot of ego in our industry.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about the evolution? We saw Compass did this with Compass Creates of what we go to call agent logos that sit inside of the brand suite. So in other words, it might be Phegan Real Estate, but literally I have an agent logo of JP, which can be used on my email signature at the start of the video. Is that something you're starting to see evolve in where agents are developing brands within brands?
Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of that. But I think when you are thinking of agents doing brands within brands, I think a lot of that agents have more control over that than they think. So, like, if you take it back a few steps, you don't necessarily always need to have a logo. Like, you obviously need a logo for the company you're working for, but if you're having two logos, it can sometimes start to get a little bit confusing. So agents can really spend a lot of time thinking about what's their personal brand. Like, are they the local agent that's standing out the front of the coffee shop getting their photo taken with their coffee in hand? Or are they like the high-end agent that's standing in this beautiful home in this like really nice outfit? You know, or are they the team that's just working so hard that and they're not even paying attention that someone's taken their photo?
Sure.
Working that hard. Like, what's their brand look like? So there's a lot that agents can do that they have control over when it comes to their visuals. And I think a lot of agents don't spend enough time investing in photography. If they spent more time investing in photography and considering how they look
Of properties or themselves?
Themselves.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And this is kind of interesting. So if you go to Place estate agents up in Brisbane, they've got a Place and Josh Phegan as an example, or Place and Steve Osborn. So they've clearly got a set of brand assets that actually make it really easy for their agents to have a brand within the brand, but sits within inside of that brand framework, so you can clearly tell its place every day of the week, which gives you the safety. And then Josh Phegan's got that personality to come around it, that you know who that person is. Now, this is what I tend to think of. Let's get really clear about now developing a bit of a brand plan and a marketing plan for what you're going to do as an agent. Now, what I did literally is that I go in every single year. We use a phenomenal photographer, Chris Ryland, who you know quite well. And Chris actually spends an entire day with me and takes photos all day. Now, off the back of that, he ends up taking like 800 photos, different suits, blue suit, white shirt, different locations, all of that. And we end up with a suite of photography. Every single time out of that shoot, there'll become like a key image, which is going to be the image of the year. That's the sort of image that we're going to use in all of our socials. It's going to be the hero image. It's going to be the number one on the website. It's going to do all of those things. And then off the back of that, we've got a foundational set of assets that we can use later on for different products, services, things that we're doing, so that then naturally we can go to create that. That's been the best thing we've ever done.
Oh, and you can really see it. Like when you do that think piece, you know, you've always got great photography going in there. And I know whenever we
like to call that Thought Provoker as the brand. Yeah. And that's an interesting one though, right? It's very, very clear what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is that whole driver is about, you know, starting to think what you need to do as an agent is you need to make sure that you've got your addictive content templates. So what emails do you need in terms of the templates, and when do they go out? What socials do you need, and when do they go out? And then starting to think about what physical assets do you need, and when do they go out?
And really just making sure that they're all on brand, because ultimately, going back to what we said at the start, your customers define what your brand is. You don't define what your brand is, but you can control that through the visuals and making sure you've got really strong brand discipline, that things look the way they should look, fonts are used in the right way, colours used in the right way. You can really control what they then say at the end about the brand.
You know, the interesting thing is that, like, we had, you know, someone who did our stuff for us a long time ago, and it was an interesting conversation. They said, okay, great, in developing that Josh Phegan brand, and they hit us up, you know, recently, and they said, oh, you know what, Josh, it's time for a rebrand. And I was like, why? And they're like, oh, no, it's time for a rebrand. I'm like, but why?
We're booked a year and a half in
We're booked in a year and a half in advance, and you know the story, but the foundational concept of what I learned very quickly out of that is I said to him, look, you know, is it going to put an extra $1 million in the bank? And he said, no. I said, well, we're not doing it then. And he goes, what do you mean by that? I said, like, literally, the brand's not the issue, man. Like, literally, now I need to go and develop some other things. And so we actually instead, you know, we updated, for example, our look and feel for our contracts and some of the things that we do inside of that. And this is what I'm trying to get you to think about. Get very, very clear about what it is that you're actually doing. And this is where I think that, like, a lot of branding agencies have kind of let people go, is that they spend a lot of money up front with that branding agency to build the brand initially, but then they do nothing with actually helping them to run that brand for many generations.
Yeah, we've actually just started this new product called You Create, and this is essentially an online service where we've got all their brand templates sitting in there. It's like $50 a month. It's not a lot of money. They sit in there, and then people can then update all of their like print pieces. They can change the agent's photo, change the text, print them out, download them as PDFs, whatever. Do the same with social, all of that stuff. So it really lets them control their brand moving forward, and lets the owners of the business have that confidence to know that they don't need to worry too much about agents going in and changing things.
You know, this is a great foundational piece for you, because when you think about, you know, the power of brand and what it can do inside of any marketplace, you start having this whole, you know, conversation. Signboards, what do you reckon? Like, what's important to get right there?
You know, I think Signboards ultimately have a utility function. The first is that it's to let buyers know that they're at the right home, because let's face it, buyers aren't driving around the street looking at signboards, that they're looking online.
And we like to take that best feature of that beautiful outdoor area and put it out the front, right?
Yeah, and then secondly, like, it's a low cost outdoor ad for the agency. You know, if you compare that to, say, a bus stop ad, you're probably paying like $500 to $1,000 a fortnight for a bus stop ad. So, like, if you're thinking it from that point of view, then you need to really consider, like, what's going on in this outdoor ad. And then thirdly, it's there for lead gen for the agents.
So what are you thinking there? Like, it's a really unique asset. Do you like the logo at the top or the bottom?
Definitely at the top, because what we're seeing more and more of is SUVs are parking in front of them. So if you've got, say, like a black and white board, and your competitors have a black and white board, and your logo's at the bottom, and there's an SUV parked in front of it, they're going to know that you're selling it. And yeah, they'll know if they're walking past, but let's face it, the majority of them are going to be driving past.
QR codes?
No.
Really?
Well, what's the problem a QR code actually solves?
Let's me go to the website and watch the video.
Yep, but if you really think about it, right? Most people are going to type in the address of the property.
I'm going to debate you on this.
I'm not going to. I think you're wrong, Josh.
But it's an interesting conversation, right, about like learning that you've got a preference. Agent photos?
I don't think they're needed.
I'm a no.
I'm a no as well. I think less but better is my thoughts when it comes to design.
So
you're going to strip back everything that's not essential.
So one of the agents that I work with is inside of a brand that they don't allow photos on the board. So what she does is she gets a photo of her in front of the board. Yeah. And that's what goes on her socials. What do you think in terms of naming a company? What do you prefer? Do you want it to be memorable or deeper connection or a good mixture of both?
Good mixture of both, yeah.
What's the difference between branding versus brand?
Branding is ultimately the aesthetics. It's ultimately the messages that you use. It's the way you treat your customers. And then the brand is what your customers say it is. It's their gut reaction.
And when you're talking to someone about positioning, what are some of the questions that you like to ask to try to work out what their positioning should be?
That's a really good question. Have you ever read that book, Blue Ocean Strategies?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so in that book, they really talk about creating your own marketplace. And so if we go back to that example earlier where I was talking about that company that's going to be the bespoke marketing compared to their competitors who are high-end, they've got the volume, and then they've also got the franchise groups. When we ask them questions, ultimately the questions we asked were what's important to them, why did they start this company, and really getting back to like what's their values. And then if they actually believe in something that's strong and they believe in it, then we try and push that and lean really hard into that.
Interesting conversation around websites. You think there's a lot of improvement to do on search?
So much. You know, like my parents, try find a single level home with no stairs.
What about investment properties if you're an investor, right?
It's so hard. What if you just want to find something that is tenanted, or you want to find something that has a certain rental yield?
Next conversation around like agent services. What do you think is important here?
As far as agent services go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the questions that agents ask inside of open homes really need to align back to some of the things that you were saying a little bit earlier on. So, you know, I went through an open home recently and they asked me, where do I live? As far as my postcode goes, it was my first, second or third home. And was I looking to buy or invest? And I think they've done some training with you because I know you teach some similar things like that. You know, and off those few questions, they identified that I owned a home in that same suburb. They identified that I was looking to buy an investment property, and they also identified that I'm a buyer. And so now I'm getting different pieces of content that relates back to what I'm looking for, and then I compare that to like the other open homes that I've been through. I'm just on their mailing list getting everything. Like here's all of our open homes this week, go through.
So I received an SMS the other day that said, hi Josh, we've made a number of very high value sales in your area over the course of the last 12 months. The market is moving very quickly. If you'd like to know what your house is worth, then please let me know. Regards, Jane, on behalf of this particular person. That agency has never done a transaction in my area. Is that a marketing fail?
Big time.
Yeah, and that's that whole key thing is that I just thought, you know what, like you've completely missed it because a lot of people are just spamming and not getting really clear about what it is they actually functionally need to do.
Yeah.
Steve, let me ask that really basic question. What do you actually do for agents and real estate agencies?
We ultimately help them position their company so we carve out a space in the market that's different to their competitors. And if we can get that right, then we can get people spending more money with them for longer periods of time. So they've ultimately got a more profitable company and they can recruit staff that believe in their mission and what they want to do as a company.
Go and tell us a bit about like the suite of services, like where does that begin and where does that end for people?
It starts with branding. So we look at, who their customers are. We help them. We help identify, their customers' needs, and then we can put together a whole marketing strategy around that. We can then put together a whole brand strategy, a whole positioning piece on how we're going to position them compared to their competitors. And then that starts to roll out into things like their campaigns, whether those campaigns are on bus ads or the things going in letterboxes or emails or streaming services, and really just putting together like a whole plan for their marketing and their brand, just to make sure that they're on brand for a long period of time. And then we've got some final pieces that are a bit smaller, where they can manage their templates and they can then create ongoing pieces for themselves.
And then for an agent who's in market, like just some great marketing and tangible leave behinds, from pre-listing kits to what we do post the listing to moving guides, all that sort of stuff is available too, right?
Yeah, lots of that, lots of booklets, lots of help guides, preparing your home for sales. We've done a lot of them, lots of DLs to go into letterboxes, yeah.
So literally, if you think about it, it's set and forget marketing, but at the same time too, the ability to completely reimagine how you want to be positioned.
Yeah, and really start with where you're wanting to go. Like, what's the plan? What's the vision? Where's the company going 5 years, 10 years from now? The more people can tell us about that, the more we can actually help them.
So a lot of what you do really is about helping people to reestablish and set the intent of who they intend to become. And then the organizational clarity of how we're actually going to get there through the physical and the digital assets that are going to be created that are wrapped in and around that brand. And then in terms of absolutely amazing execution, to make sure that the measurement of every single resource that we produce gets the result to either increase awareness or to drive conversion inside of those very specific campaigns. And this is about turning that marketing dollar on, because the brand and the marketing that you're doing actually works. Steve, if someone wanted to get in contact with you, how would they do it?
Jump on the website, identitymarketing.com.au.
Steve, so great to have you on the program. Look forward to seeing you at Blueprint.
Thanks, Josh. Looking forward to it as well.